Hey, welcome to Tier Mania, and oh boy, do we have a big one for you today. We are doing the 2010s to 2020 anime tier list. Now, might as well just start getting into it right away because there's a lot of caveats to this, so I want to go over that really quickly. Of course, this list is only including anime that I have either seen or heard a lot about. I think it's pretty unfair to completely rank shows that I haven't seen a single episode of or haven't heard much about at all. So if your favorite anime is not on this list, I apologize. I can't watch everything, but there are some pretty big names that are here, like Bleach, Haikyuu, some other pretty popular shows that didn't make the cut for me, unfortunately. Not to say those were bad shows, I just haven't seen them yet. And again, I think it would be pretty unfair to just go off on them if I haven't seen them. Two, I do want to clarify right now, before we start, this is going to be, I'm going to try my best to be as positive as I can about all of these shows. Over the years, I have tried to be less and less of a hater, even though sometimes, sometimes you got to be a hater. But I'm going to try to be as positive as I can. I think that reflects in the tier system I'm using. So, to go over the tiers really quickly, we got the GOAT tier, the greatest of all time. I think that goes without explaining what that is. We got S tier, which is the best of the best, just not exactly GOATs yet. We have A tier, which is still very, very, very good shows, just like lacking a little something. They may have one fatal flaw that's holding them back, but are still great shows. I went ahead and broke down B and C tier into the pluses because I think there's a lot of shows that are going to be in this tier, so I wanted to differentiate them a little bit. So the rest of the tiers are shows that are still good. Like, nothing on this list is bad. I'm not going to be ranking any anime that are just straight garbage or that are like very, very well known for being poor quality. I think there's not much to go over there. Like, if it's bad, we all know it's bad. So let's just not talk about it, I guess. So this tier list, again, I'm going to be trying to be as positive as I can. Sometimes the hater might come out, but this is the way I wanted to format it, and that's what we're going to be doing. So as far as what we're basing the ranks off of, I wanted to try and be as objective as I can, but with a ranking like this, of course, it's going to be pretty subjective. But the criteria I'm working with is overall quality of the shows, just like how good it looks, how well the show is overall. Critical acclaim, obviously how well it did amongst the critics. Overall popularity, overall impact, how much should like this show change, or how much did the show impact anime, or just the genre it's in as a whole. And then, of course, my own personal taste and opinion. So, keeping all that in mind, that's how we're going to be doing it. Anyway, 3 minutes in, let's just start off the tier list. So, appropriately, starting with Demon Slayer. I mean, I'm representing Demon Slayer, so we got to start somewhere. I think, even though it's still pretty new, I think Demon Slayer is easily S tier already. I know you might call me a bandwagon, you might click off the video right now for putting it that high, but I really think it's that good. All the characters are extremely likable. You get going immediately. The show wastes no time getting into world building, and you immediately get sucked into that world, and you really want to know what else is going on. I think it's paced extremely well. It's like that perfect middle ground of having like, the monster of the week formula, but spending enough time on each demon to really give you a sense of how powerful these creatures are, while still setting things up for future seasons, still having that like shonen goodness of good action and fun powers. And I think the biggest thing about Demon Slayer is the animation is incredible. Like, it is wild how good this show looks. It's just, it's such a good show overall. I can't wait to see what they do with it. All my friends that have read the manga have said nothing good things about how it's going to progress. So I think the sky is the limit for Demon Slayer, and we'll see where it ends up, 5 to 10 years, how people are talking about it. But I think as of right now, 2022, it's off to a really good start. Next up is Psycho Pass, which is an interesting show because I think it's really solid. I think it's a very solid show overall, but I don't think I can put it any higher than B tier. Again, not because of the show's quality, but just because of everything else. It was popular, but wasn't super popular. It got good critical acclaim, like it got good reviews, but nothing like raving. And I think the biggest thing holding Psycho-Pass back is the impact side of things. Like, this show was good. I could definitely recommend it if you're looking for something new. The premise of Psycho-Pass is super interesting, like this whole society that they have set up. And I think just anime as a whole, what it does so well is world building and getting you interested in the conflicts of these different shows. But I think the just overall like society that it sets up is super fun to be in. It's super fun to see the different like mindsets and psyches of everyone in the show and how they handle things. And again, the whole plot is really fun. I think it does get a little slow sometimes, but since it's kind of in that like cop show or like drama genre, that will happen. But overall, very, very good show. Definitely underrated, but I don't think I could put it super high because it is lacking in those other aspects, not just the quality of the show, but everything else. But it's still definitely worth your time for sure. Next up, we got Akame Ga Kill, which is... Ooh, this is an interesting one to rank. I'm probably going to say interesting on like all of these shows, but this one is especially interesting because Akame is one of those shows that when it came out, it was all over the place. Everybody was talking about it. And then the second it ended, it stopped. Like, it was just like there and gone super quickly. So I think it loses a lot of points in the impact category. But just in the actual quality of the show, and how popular it was for that time, I think Akame's B+ tier. I don't think it's crazy good. I don't think they handle a lot of things very well. Like, trying not to spoil things. The way they handle fatalities in that show is interesting. It's very different from what we normally see from shonen anime. So I think that's a really good thing about Akame is that they, you know, just like Game of Thrones, they're not afraid to say goodbye to a character that you have come to love. But I think the biggest thing holding Akame back is the ending. Again, I won't go into too much detail about it if you haven't seen it. But the way the show ends definitely leaves a lot to be desired, and it just didn't feel right. And that's probably me being a bit biased, but it seems like the general opinion is that the ending of the show, and of a lot of anime in general, was not great. So I think if they could have tweaked the ending a bit, changed some things along the way, it could have been a lot higher and a lot more popular. But for what it was, and only being one season, I believe, I think it was a pretty good show. A pretty good show overall. It just could have been better, you know? Next up, it's kind of hard to see from some of these logos. It's going to be tough to read. Next up is Madoka Magica, which is truly an experience. There's a lot going on in this show, but it's really good. I think it's an A-tier show. The music, especially in this show, I think is phenomenal. The whole like playing on the magical girls genre of anime, and like what you would think this anime would be going into it, and then what it actually is really cool concept how they handled it. I think it does drag a little bit in the middle. But the way just the show progresses overall and where it ends up is truly wild. It's very unique. This is a wild anime. I know I keep saying that, but like that's just the best way I can describe it. But it is really good overall. Again, the characters in the show I think are really compelling. The dilemma that quote-unquote dilemma that comes up towards the end I think is really interesting, and a fun take on again this genre. And it's just a really quality show overall. It's definitely worth your time. It's a pretty quick watch. Can definitely recommend it. But I don't think it's like as great as those other shows. So I don't think it has that overall popularity and impact than the shows are going to be in the higher tiers here. But for what it is, I think it completely nailed it, and is a great show. So next up, we got a doozy. Of course, Naruto. For these bigger shonens like Naruto, Dragon Ball, just heads up, I'm going to be talking about all of it like combined. So we're talking Naruto and Shippuden, but not Boruto. So Naruto, I don't think I'm alone in this opinion. I don't think it's very new, but it's going in the GOAT tier. It can't go anywhere but the GOAT tier. Like, Naruto quite literally changed the game. It's a fantastic shonen show. I do get the gripes. I get it. There's a lot of filler. There's a lot of wasted time. But of the episodes that are there to progress the plot, it's phenomenal. It's a great show. Amazing music, amazing characters, great plot. Again, amazing world building from the show, especially. And I think the thing that really resonates with Naruto, and it's something that a lot of anime could really learn from it, is that how well it handles the side characters and how well it handles just everyone besides the main characters overall. Because that seems to be a common complaint with a lot of, especially shonen, but a lot of popular anime, is that like they do a good job of setting up this world, but we want to know more about it. We want to get into it, and we just don't get that time with all of these characters. But with Naruto, you do. like just think about a character like Rock Lee, like that in theory should not be like a very impactful character at all, but like has just taken over the anime world in the past decade, and it's just a show of how great this show is. And I get it. It has a lot of haters. A lot of people call it overrated, but I truly don't think there is an argument to say that it's not one of the greatest anime of all time. So Naruto, GOAT tier. It's just gotta be. Next up is Kill la Kill, and I'll admit it, I'm very biased. I don't know if you can see it, because my head is blocking it, but behind me I've got a Kill la Kill poster up in my house, and because of that, I think Kill la Kill is definitely A tier, for sure. It is a lot, I will say. It's definitely an anime that is playing off of other anime tropes, and I think it does a wonderful job of making fun of like current anime things that go on, and stereotypes like perfectly. First of all, this show is hilarious. Like it is so funny. The comedic timing is great. The soundtrack to the show is incredible. The main conflicts between all the characters are very compelling, very interesting. I think this show is one of the few anime that has a fantastic ending. Great ending to the show. And it's just an overall such a fun time. Yes, it is a bit ridiculous, which is why it's not going any higher than this. It's very much super over the top by design. There's a lot going on here, a lot of fan service in the bad way. But just, if you can put that aside, incredible show. But there are going to be a lot of people that are put off to that because of how ridiculous it is, and that's a totally fair criticism. So I think A tier is a very good spot for it. And it's, again, very much worth your watch, especially if you're someone that watches a lot of anime and can appreciate what the show is doing and like what it's making fun of. Definitely recommend Kill la Kill. And again, the action is fantastic, but again, it does have some flaws for sure. Next up, speaking of Kill la Kill, is, I believe this is Gurren Lagann, which I think Gurren Lagann is also A tier, but for me personally, I'm going to put it below these other two shows. And that's mainly for the middle section of the show. Starts off with a boom. Like, Gurren Lagann comes in hot, immediately gets you invested in the story and these characters, and is just like so gripping and fun to watch. And then the time skip happens, and as much as it does wrap up really well, that middle section is pretty rough to get through post time skip. At least in my opinion. I know not everyone feels that way, but for me and a lot of my friends that have watched the show, which is also something I'm basing this tier list off of a lot, is other people's opinions that I respect. It does drag a bit in the middle. But if you can get through that like little bit of a lull period where they're setting up the finale and everything that comes after, it's an incredible show. Surprisingly emotional, again, a great music, great action, and it's pretty quick. I believe it's only 20-ish episodes, maybe 30, but I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, Gurren Lagann, fantastic time. Definitely recommend it. Next up is Deadman Wonderland, which, okay, we might be getting to our first hot take here. But I think this is just C+ tier. It is a very interesting concept, to be fair. It's like a lot of anime, starts off with a bang, immediately gets you get you into what's happening. But I just know for me personally, the concept of the show starts off one way and then it turns into like blood-bending shonen, which is like, for the manga readers, I'm sure was great. But for me personally, not what I was looking for, especially how it started. I thought that starting premise is really interesting of like these convicts being sent to die and this crazy death amusement park thing. I was really looking forward to seeing how that was going to play out. And it still does play out, but it turns into more of a traditional like magic power shonen-y show. It does do a lot of things well. I think there's a lot of mystery going on with the plot, and how that unfolds as it goes on is really interesting. But I think overall, it could have been a lot better. I think this is definitely a show with a lot of missed potential. Again, I've heard the manga's pretty good, but just talking about the show strictly, I do think it could have been a lot better. So C+ tier for Deadman Wonderland. Back to back. Those of you that know me, I am a Persona 5 stan. I love the Persona 5 Royale video games so much. I've talked about them a ridiculous amount. I won't bore you because I could be here all day. But Persona 5, the animation, it's rough. I love Persona 5 so much. I love these characters. I love this world. I adore the soundtrack. All of that is still there, but it's just the show, of course, doesn't have the 120 plus hours that the video game has to set everything up. So the show is just lacking so much time, and it doesn't get to do what it could do. So I think Persona 5 the animation really, really lacking. I wish it was better. I really do. But if you are already a Persona fan, I can recommend the show because it's just fun to see your characters again and get to see them in animation, not just in like small cutscenes throughout the game, but actually a full show. But again, it's just compared to the standard of other anime, it does not hold up, I don't think. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. If all of you hate me, I'm sorry because I love Persona, but I don't think the show makes the cut, unfortunately. Next up, we have Soul Eater, which is a tricky one because the quality of the show depends on the seasons. But factoring everything in, I do think Soul Eater is also A tier. I do. I think I think that's a good spot for it. I don't know if I could put it above these. But Soul Eater definitely clears in all of the categories. Quality show, absolute banger of an intro, first of all. I think it was the season 2 intro, or like the season 1, part 2 one. But the intro songs absolutely slap. The plot is super interesting. The characters are really fun and extremely likable. Even the side characters are very likable and endearing. The whole world is really fun to be in. Again, the animation, the fight scenes are wonderful, especially for being an older anime, at least on this tier list. And it just overall was a great show. I think it had a pretty solid impact for its time. But the thing that's holding it back a little bit is, one, season 3 and season 3 as a whole, and then specifically season 4's ending are, again, with anime, there's going to be a lot of not so great endings, so it's just kind of part of the deal. But even with that in mind, definitely a bit to be desired. And again, season 3 as a whole was just okay compared to the others. So it's not a perfect show by any means, but for the majority of it, it's a very quality show. Definitely worth your time. It's just a great show around. So shout out to Soul Eater. Next up, we got Fullmetal Alchemist, and again, just like Naruto, we're talking about both Fullmetal, or just both Fullmetal Alchemist and Brotherhood combined. And even if you didn't include the original and just were talking Brotherhood, again, I don't think there's an argument. This is a GOAT tier show. It's just incredible. Again, another show that starts off with a bang, immediately gets you rolling into the world, and you just immediately want to see how these powers are going to be used, and all the different characters that you find and you get to meet along the way are extremely interesting, and have very cool ways that they use their alchemy. And it's just like quality-wise might be the best show on this tier list. Like overall storyline, characters, action, music, everything coming together. It's the full package. I think it's paced really well. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And it just is, it's everything you'd want in an anime. It just is. It's just the only thing that's keeping it from being over Naruto is I do think just both popularity and impact wise. They're both extremely popular shows, but just the effect that Naruto has had on anime is ridiculous. And as much as Fullmetal has had a very big impact as well, especially on just the anime fan overall, it's hard to beat Naruto. But even with all of that said, Fullmetal Alchemist, incredible show. One of the best shows out there, period, let alone anime. For sure worth your time. 100%. Next up we got Angel Beats, which I love Angel Beats, I really do. I think it's a wonderful show. But with all the criteria in mind, I can't put it any higher than B tier. It's, if you haven't heard of anime, or if you haven't heard of Angel Beats, it's just a short little show about it's a slight, kind of like a slice of life anime. I would have to categorize it about the afterlife, and that's all I'll say about it. It is so wonderful. All the characters are super likable. It's such a fun show. It's just wonderful. You know, like there's only so much I can say about it because it's just a delightful show. You know, like it's a quick watch. It's surprisingly funny. It's extremely endearing, very emotional. Just a great show. It's just a very solid show overall. The only thing holding it back is, again, the categories. It's not super popular. Critically, it did fine. And it didn't have that big of an impact on anime overall. I don't think anyone's waking up going, oh man, I can't wait to dress up as my favorite Angel Beats character to this convention. You know what I mean? But again, if it was up to me, it would be much higher than this. But I can only have my personal bias affect it so much. So I think B tier is a good spot for Angel Beats. Even though if you haven't seen it, highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is such a fun watch. And it's just a really solid show. Next up, we got Attack on Titan. And again, this might be a controversial opinion, I'm not sure. But I think this show already, even though it's not fully done yet, as of right now, it's already in the GOAT tier. It's already in the GOAT tier. Like, every category for this tier list absolutely clears. Overall quality, again, another show that starts off with a bang, and you're immediately into it. So many questions. Though, I mean, I might be showing my age here a little bit, but when it first dropped in 2013, you could not escape this show. I knew so many people that didn't watch anime, but have seen Attack on Titan. Like, it's wild how much this show came out and just spread, and just instantly became a huge part of the anime culture as a whole. Its impact is insane. Overall quality, amazing. Amazing music, super endearing characters, very intriguing world, super unique world as well. So again, once the first season came out, so many questions to follow, and then it just continued to build. Critically acclaimed, obviously super popular, and it's one of the best anime you're gonna find. I get it, there's some nitpicks, especially going in to season 4. A lot of people are very divided on, you know, who to root for and what exactly the show's trying to tell us, and there's still a lot of questions to be answered. But from what we've seen at this point, I personally don't think there's any arguing. This is one of the greatest anime of all time. It just is. It's so good. And again, if you want to talk bangers, if you want to talk intro bangers, Attack on Titan's got it. So you know, it's the full package, everything you'd want in a show. Cannot recommend it enough. This is one of the shows that, for people that don't watch anime and they want to know where to start, I do believe this is a great place to go. So, Attack on Titan, go to Cho. Speaking of go to Chos, we got Cowboy Bebop, which a lot of people will argue this is the greatest anime of all time. I don't think so personally, but it is one of the best, clearly. If you want to talk just pure style and uniqueness, Bebop's got it. Like, this show is incredible. Again, another great showing of world building and getting the viewer interested. Everything flows so well. Every character is super interesting and super endearing. Obviously, popularity and critically acclaimed wise absolutely clears. Just an overall fantastic show. Like, I don't think anyone's arguing that Bebop is a bad show by any means. But it's clearly one of the best. There's only so much I can say that hasn't been said already about Bebop. But again, incredible show. If you haven't seen it already, I don't know why you haven't. Next up, we got Parasyte, which super underrated show in my opinion. And it's tough to rank though, because again, considering all of the criteria we're working with here, it doesn't have the exact, popularity and impact that a lot of the other shows will have. But I think overall, Parasyte's really solid. It's close to being S tier, but I don't think it's on that level yet. If you haven't seen Parasyte, again, a phenomenal show. It's pretty quick, and it's really intense. Like, the soundtrack of the show is incredible, super unique, and sets the tone really well. The characters feel super grounded in reality. For how like sci-fi-y this show is, I think it does an incredible job at still having realism and feeling like you would know these characters. Feel like you've met these characters already, even though there's only so much material to go off of. The action is super intense. The plot is really intriguing. You want to know more. You want to know what's happening. It's a very enthralling show. And it has phenomenal quality all around. Again, the only thing I think holding this back is just the popularity and impact aspect. I don't think there's many shows trying to copy Parasyte per se. And again, it's just not nearly as popular as some of these upper echelon shows. But for what it is, just overall package, overall quality, Parasyte is a great show. Definitely recommend. I believe it's still on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It is phenomenal. Oh boy. So now we're on to Sword Art Online, which, oh boy, there has been so much talk about Sword Art Online at this point that it's kind of wild. But honestly, I think it's gonna go in B+ tier. Okay, I think it's gonna go in B+ tier. Now, for those of you that are Sword Art Online haters, I can hear it already. This show is garbage. It's the worst anime of all time. How could you put it that high? And those of you that are Sword Art fans are like, that's disrespectful. This should be in the GOAT tier. Listen, I think, again, this show is so divisive that it has to be in the middle. It just has to be. It can't be as bad as everyone says it is, and it can't be as good as everyone says it is. It's like, it's got to be in this happy middle. And if we're just talking about the criteria, overall quality, season 1 starts off great. Once we get halfway through, it gets a little weird. But hey, it's anime, that'll happen. You get to season 2, very different, but surprisingly interesting. You get to the halfway point, and this is about what we expected. So, just overall quality, solid. Sound design, great. The soundtrack, wonderful. Characters, hit or miss, to say the least. Critical acclaim, very all over the place. Popularity, through the roof. Obviously, this is an extremely popular show, and whether you love it or hate it, you can't deny it's a very interesting premise, even though we know it's been done before. This show took that premise to the clout heights, as they say. And overall impact, again, is undeniable. How much this show has changed anime for the good or better. It is undeniable, the presence of Sword Art Online. No matter what you do, if you like anime, you have heard of Sword Art Online. So, I think with all that said, it's going to be in B+ tier. But, again, there's arguments for it to be higher, there's arguments for it to be lower. But throwing in my personal opinion, I think it's just fine. It's a fine show. It's really not that bad, and it's really not that good. So I think B+ tier is a good place. So I will. This is probably the point where you're hitting that dislike button. But hey, you live your life. I can't tell you what to do. Next up, we got Future Diary, which is a very unique show for sure. It definitely has a lot of those like shonen tropes and like follows the genre pretty well. But it is, as far as like, I guess the vibe of Future Diary, it definitely stands out. I'll say that. But as far as where to rank it, honestly, it's weird because it's got a lot of things going for it. I think it also goes in B+ tier. It doesn't have that like over the top popularity of a Sword Art Online or of a Naruto or of these other shows, but it is pretty popular. It made a huge impact when it first came out. It was the talk of the town, I'll tell you what. And critically, it does pretty well. And overall quality, it's a good show. Like it's got everything you want. It's just it's missing that like oomph. You know what I mean? Like all of these other shows above it, you know, Demon Slayer, Naruto, Attack on Titan, like these are huge shows. And Future Diary doesn't have that. It is very popular within the anime community, but again, it's just not on that same level. And the ending is a lot like with a show like this, it was gonna have a wild ending, but even with that in mind, it's a lot. And it does get it just gets very, I guess, messy at the end. That might be the wrong term, but there's just a lot going on towards the end. But for the beginning and the middle, it is very intense. It's very fun. It does have, the Monster of the Week formula, even though it's like other contenders, I guess you would call it. But it's a very unique premise, and it definitely gets you interested from the get-go. And again, also has a great soundtrack, very interesting and unique characters. But again, I think this is a solid place for it. I don't think you can argue it's much higher, but overall quality, it's a really solid show. So, Future Diary, there you go. Okay. Next up, we have Death Note, which, there's only two places this can go. And I'm trying to figure out which one it is, but my gut's telling me GOAT tier. It's got to be GOAT tier. I don't think it's better than any of these shows, but I think it definitely holds its own in the greatest of all time tier. Just everything about Death Note is wild. Like the characters are crazy. The soundtrack has honestly kind of become like a meme at this point because of how popular it is and how much it gets used for other things outside of Death Note. But the premise is amazing. Again, the characters are really, really interesting, and like, even though you know Light is obviously a terrible person, you're still rooting for him for the most part, which is a very hard thing to do that only a few pieces of media can do pretty well, like a Breaking Bad or something like that. And just it's clearly had a huge impact. Even today, it's still super popular. It's had a bunch of spin-offs, and nothing beats the anime. I mean, obviously, you know, the manga's great too, don't get me wrong. But it's an incredible show overall. It's a wild ride from start to finish. Yes, there are some complaints about the ending, but overall, regardless of how you feel about the ending, I do think this is just an undeniably incredible show. And it belongs in the greatest of all time, for sure. Definitely worth your time. Next up, we have Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. I'm just going to roll with Hunter x Hunter. Specifically the 2011 version. But it's close. It's very, very close. Again, similar to Death Note, I'm leaning between the two higher tiers here. But again, my gut is telling me. It's going in the GOAT tier. I know there's a lot of shows in the GOAT tier at this point, so it's getting a little crowded. But it's really, really good. As soon as it starts off, with a lot of these shows, you immediately want to know more about the world, the characters, and I think that's also something this show really excels at, is the characters. So many of them are so interesting and endearing, and even the villains, you want to know more about. You love to see their powers and all that stuff. It's such a good overall show, and I think this might be recency bias that's putting it this high, because especially impact and popularity now is arguably more than it's ever been. Like when 10 years ago, people were talking about Hunter x Hunter, but it wasn't like crazy. Now I've seen so many people with Killua shirts and Gon shirts and like all of that stuff. Like it feels more impactful now than it ever has been, which is wild for a show that came out in 2011. But it's just incredible from start to finish. The arcs that these characters go on is wonderful, and I think that's another point in this show's favor is how well they treat their characters. So, in my opinion, I think this is a GOAT show, a GOAT tier show. Again, I'm not saying it's better than all the other shows in the tier, but again, I think it has its own place here, and it definitely deserves it. If I'm overhyping it, let me know in the comments. But I think it goes here. So, next up we have Death Parade, which my personal bias is definitely dragging this down, because I will say, I'll say it right now, I'm a Death Parade hater. I've watched this show twice, and I did not like it either time. Like, it just was not an enjoyable experience for me. Wasn't having a good time. But considering all of the criteria that we've already established, I think Death Parade is a B+ tier show for sure. The transparency is making it hard to see. But it's a very solid show overall. Again, it's tackling the ever so fun idea of human nature, but it does it so well. And again, speaking of intro bangers, this intro goes crazy. Like, it's actually wild how good this intro is. But especially for how short it is, it does a really good job of setting everything up, paying it off later, and having intriguing scenarios episode to episode. So quality-wise, it's definitely got it. Just again, it's lacking on the popularity and impact side of things, where it's not as big as these other shows, but for what it was, quality all around, great experience. Not for me, but in general, it's a very good show. It's just I personally am not a big fan of it, so I'm probably ranking it a little bit lower than it deserves. But I still do think B+ tier is a very good spot for it. Again, it's not my cup of tea. And since it's my list, that's gonna be how it goes. But I think B+ tier is a good spot. Next up, we've got Blue Exorcist, which I think just goes in B tier. Blue Exorcist is one of those shows that, when you look at it on paper, it should be one of the best shows, but it's just kind of there. I know that's not expert analysis, but quality-wise, it's good. I think it's paced pretty well. It's got interesting characters. It's got an interesting plot. It was critically, it did pretty well, and it's decently popular. But it just, I guess what it's lacking is that impact factor that I've mentioned a few times now. When you think of the best anime, Blue Exorcist doesn't really come up. But when you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, Blue Exorcist, that's a good show. But I'm not gonna be like, oh, you need to watch this show. It's just solid, you know. So again, I feel bad because I'm not elaborating super well on this one, but I think B tier is a good spot for it because it's a good show. It's lacking that extra oomph, you know. It's lacking that juice, that impact that a lot of these other shows have. Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but me personally, I haven't heard a lot of discourse about Blue Exorcist, ever since it came out, really. So if there's a diehard fan base, you guys let me know. But just from what I've seen, from what I've heard, B tier seems like a good spot for it because it's good. It's nothing crazy, you know. Next up, we got 7 Deadly Sins, and similar to Death Parade, if this was just my opinion, Oh boy, you guys probably wouldn't like me. But just going off the entire criteria of what we've already established, I think Seven Deadly Sins has got to go also in B+ tier. I'm going to put it there towards the bottom. But it does have a lot of the things we're looking for. It's very popular. It's definitely had a surprising impact. Like, Seven Deadly Sins has a huge fan base. And it's very present. It's there. It's definitely got the world building thing that a lot of these great shows have. But just, I think my personal opinion is dragging this thing down, because for me, Seven Deadly Sins just felt very forgettable. Again, I'm trying not to be too negative, so I won't like rag on this thing for too long. But again, with a lot of these shows, just immediately, like you're super invested in the characters and the world. You want to know more. You want to get invested. I just don't feel like Seven Deadly Sins has that. Like it's there. It's a shonen, but am I dying to watch the next Seven Deadly Sins episode? No. Now, to be fair, it does get better over time. Like a lot of these shows, it starts a bit slow. But it just, for me personally, I don't think it's worth the long investment that a lot of these other shows are going to be paying off way faster. You know what I mean? So, again, I feel bad because it's just, I know a lot of people love this show, but just for me personally, I don't think it's that great compared to everything else on this list. But for what it is, it's solid. Don't get me wrong. It's just, again, not my cup of tea. Next up, we have Black Bullet, which might be the most like niche show on here, and I think it goes in C+ tier. Those of you that have seen Black Bullet, it's just like, it's such an odd show. It's like a shonen buddy cop movie, but like the cops are a grown man and a little girl. Like it's so weird. Like I don't know how to describe it, but the relationships and the characters are pretty endearing. It's a very interesting premise, but again, like a lot of these shows towards the bottom, it kind of came and went. Like it was decently popular when it first dropped, and you didn't really hear about it since, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about Black Bullet since. I could be wrong. There might be a huge fan base for this and I'm just missing out. But from what I can tell, it was fine for what it was, but it's not really making any waves here. You know, this isn't a One Punch Man, you know what I mean? As far as shonen goes. But Black Bullet, it's an okay show. If you've seen a lot of the more popular animes and you're looking for something new to watch, you could definitely give it a try. But I can't super recommend it. But it's just okay. Next up, we have Your Lie in April, which is a very good show. And I think, honestly, it goes in A tier as well. I can't really put it much higher than that, just because, again, it's lacking that huge popularity that a lot of these shows do, and that huge impact. But even then, for what it is, it's had a huge impact, I feel, on the anime community as a whole. Very, very, very endearing show. Also, very good soundtrack. It doesn't like immediately start with a bang like a lot of these shows, but of course it's not a shonen, so it doesn't have like, ooh, cool powers, shiny things to get you hooked. But emotionally and relationship-wise, out of the park. Fantastic show. Very much taking a ride on the feels train with this one. But it's just, everything about it is so quality. The animation looks amazing. Again, the relationships are super interesting. And it's a very relatable show. A lot of these shows are dealing with, like gods and these super powered beings and these demons and all these things that are so supernatural and so larger than life that when you watch something like Your Lie in April, it's so nice to have a show that's just like about something that could happen to you, something that could happen to your best friend, something to your cousin. And it's so endearing, and it's just really quality overall. So because of that, I think it's solidly an A tier. It's just, again, it's lacking that impact and that popularity. because, you know, after you watch it one time, you're pretty much good. I mean, I know a lot of people that this is like their comfort show and they go back to it. But for the most part, I think once you've seen it once, you're good. But it's a very enjoyable show, and highly recommend it. Oh boy, we got another doozy. Next up, we've got Dragon Ball Z. And again, regardless of how you feel about it, I don't think there's an argument for it to be any lower than the GOAT tier. It just has to be. I think it goes here. I know there's a whole big three stuff, which, you know, we'll talk about later. But it is so clearly one of the greatest shows of all time. There's only so much to be said about Dragon Ball at this point. And again, I'm talking about, you know, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, like everything. So like with all that in mind, obviously just impact is through the roof on this show. How much Dragon Ball is referenced in other media is unparalleled. It's crazy how much this one show has affected the entire world, let alone anime. And then, of course, you go to overall quality and critical acclaim, and it's also amazing. A lot of these characters, again, very endearing. I get the argument of, oh, it's just dudes screaming. How good can it be? But I'm telling you, just watch the Cell saga. You know, like that'll tell you everything you need to know about Dragon Ball. It's an incredible show. It's undeniable how good the show is. Yes, there's tons of nitpicky stuff you can get into with Super and GT and all this stuff, and like power scaling and things like that. But if we're just talking popularity, impact, critical acclaim, and just quality, again, it is undeniable how present Dragon Ball is. And in my own personal opinion, great show. It's just when you think anime, you're thinking Dragon Ball, and you can't say that for a lot of shows on this list for how good they are, even for how good they are. So I think Dragon Ball, easy GOAT tier. I don't think it's debatable, but not to say that it's a perfect show. Speaking of perfect shows, we're going straight into Steins Gate, which is a phenomenal show. I will say I don't think it's GOAT tier per se, even though some people will say this is like one of the greatest anime of all time, or is the greatest of all time. I don't think it's quite there, but overall, obviously, phenomenal show. When you have a plot that deals with time travel, and they handle it this well, especially in the wake of things like Avengers Endgame and other pieces of media that handle time travel and just open up a whole can of worms, Steins Gate really does it well. The characters are super fun and daring. It's not throwing a million characters at you in a million scenarios. It's got a compact story, and it handles it fantastically. The music is amazing in the show. It's paced really well. It covers all of the bases of the storyline, and it answers your questions while still building, while still having this mystery element to it, while also having stakes and like not feeling like it's just going on forever and like there's no threat. It has everything you'd want story-wise, character-wise. It is such a quality show. Like overall quality, again, this is one of the highest shows on this list, just straight quality. And for its genre, definitely has a huge impact for sure. Obviously a lot of the shows on this list are going to be shonen, and for a show that is not that, to be this high is a huge accomplishment for sure. And just personal opinion as well, Steins Gate, phenomenal show. Like it's one of a kind. If you've never seen it, it's a pretty quick watch. I can't recommend it enough. It's fantastic. The only thing holding it back from GOAT tier is just the popularity and a little bit of the impact parts of it. It's not nearly as popular as any of the shows up there. And as much as it has impacted a lot of anime fans overall, there are people that watch anime all the time and have never heard of Steins Gate. Like there are a ton of anime fans like that. So I think it's held back a little bit just in those aspects, but just overall quality of the show, one of the best you're gonna find. No, next up we have Fairy Tail, which I feel bad. I feel bad. But I think it's gonna go right. Honestly, I think it's gonna go right next to Seven Deadly Sins. It is. I'm not gonna talk about it for too long because I'm gonna be rehashing a lot of points here. But it's very similar to Seven Deadly Sins in my opinion. Very popular. It's even more impactful. So honestly, I think it's probably here. But I think the quality and my personal opinion of the show are really dragging it down. I've tried so many times, and I just don't get the hype. I really don't. Like, someone please write a whole soliloquy in the comments telling me why I'm wrong and why I need to rewatch it again and why it's such a good show, because I just don't see it. I just don't. It feels like just another shonen show that's there, and you can watch it if you want to. There's tons of content, but is it really worth it? You know, and I know that's harsh because I'm trying to be as positive as I can here. But I really don't see it. It does have like the overall quality of like a good soundtrack, good animation, good fight scenes, all that. But it doesn't have that like factor that really grips you and grounds you in this world and makes you want to spend time in it. At least for me, it just doesn't have that. Again, I could just be missing something. If you guys want to tell me in the comments that I'm wrong and I'm really dumb and a little stupid man, go for it. But there's just something about Fairy Tail that's missing. It just doesn't have that, I guess, that anime magic, if you want to call it that. But it's leaving a good amount to be desired. So, but it is very popular. It is a quality show overall. Again, I just think it's lacking a lot of that oomph. So it's gonna go in B+ tier. But hey, that's just how I feel. Again, you can tell me I'm wrong. Next up, we have Fate Zero. This is one of the shows that I'm not considering all of it for, because I haven't seen Fate Stay Night and everything that goes into the Fate series. I'm just strictly talking about Fate Zero. And I think it's at the top of B+ tier, actually. It's a really good show. It's surprisingly not something that, even though I personally watched Fate Zero without knowing anything about the rest of the Fate series, just off of a friend recommendation, it immediately starts to go off. The concept is super interesting of like choosing these champions from historical figures, fighting for this like all-powerful gauntlet. That part's a little but just the overall concept of this like death gauntlet, I guess, or this battle royale, if you want to call it that, is wild, and like how the different historical figures interact with their champions, whatever the term is for the show, is super interesting, and how everything plays out is really fun. It's surprisingly well paced. The action is done really well. The conflicts that come up and the character dilemmas that are put forth are very believable. And for being such a fantastical show, it's one of those shows that feels very grounded in reality and feels like these aren't just character tropes, or these aren't just anime characters, but they feel like things that real people would be doing. They feel like if this were to happen, this is how actually it would play out. And I think it gets a lot of points for that. I just don't think it can. I just don't think it can go any higher than B+ tier. Because again, it's lacking that impact and that popularity, which we're coming back to a lot, but it's true. As much as it is a very solid show and it was very popular at first, this isn't a show that people are still really talking about. Again, not the Fate series overall, just Fate Zero. Again, very, very good for what it was, very good in its time, but I think it just doesn't have that huge impact on the anime world overall, and that's what's holding it back. But it's still very, very quality overall. Very good show. Next up we have Jujutsu Kaisen, which it's hard to rank it because it's a very new show. Very, very new show. But even with it being new already, again, this might be a lot, but I think it's already S tier. I do. It's even newer than Demon Slayer. But again, not the intro, but the outro of the song, or this show, absolute banger. Lost in Paradise goes crazy. And again, it it's another phenomenal shonen show that is exactly what you'd want from a shonen, but still feels unique and feels like a breath of fresh air for the genre. And the characters and powers are so interesting in this show. And the fight scenes are great, and the relationships between the different characters, the overall conflicts going on are wild. Animation is very, very good. Like, it's the overall package. It's everything you'd want in a shonen. Jujutsu Kaisen's got it. Shout out to Jennifer Lawrence. One time. It's just, again, it's a very new show. So we'll see how it plays out over time. I've heard good things, but it just, we'll have to wait and see on how it's going to fully play out before I can put it any higher than this. But as far as starts go, phenomenal start. Like, again, if you're looking for a new show, or if you're newer to anime and like want to start with something that's not a million episodes long, Jujutsu Kaisen is a great show to go to, because it is super intense in the best way possible. And again, I can't wait to see where it goes, because as of now, we've still got a long way. Next up, we've got Log Horizon, which I think is also in the B tier and is very similar to The Exorcist in that, for what it's unfortunate because it's the direct competitor to Sword Art Online. It was popular at the exact same time, but it's like, even though I think through the entirety of the show, overall quality, it's better than Sword Art, it's just not as it doesn't have that impact. It just doesn't. Like, Sword Art Online is this ridiculously popular show, and Log Horizon's popular, but it's not that. And again, it's unfair to directly compare it to another show, but I think with the premises being so similar and the releases being around the same time, it is inevitable to have these shows be compared. Those of you that like sports, which I don't know how many of you in watching this video are going to like sports, but it's very comparable to Trae Young and Luka Doncic, how they're always going to be compared, even though it's not really fair. Just their situations are going to have this happen. But just again, overall quality, very solid show. The characters are super endearing. The plot is really interesting, especially how Log Horizon, as much as Sword Art Online is also the video game in real life show, Log Horizon is like real video games. Like, anyone that's ever played an MMO or any like RPG style game, Log Horizon is going to feel very familiar because it nails like those video game tropes and things that pop up. It's very true to that, which is great. But I think the biggest thing holding it back is also the impact side of things. Log Horizon, it's popular, but it kind of came and gone. Or came and went. It's not exactly like breaking any walls down here. No, I don't think anyone's going to a convention and super jazzed to dress up as a Log Horizon character, at least in 2022. So I think for its time, it was very solid. But again, it's just lacking a bit. And I think towards the middle, or like towards season 2, when they really start to focus on the political side of things, again, it's interesting, but we don't need like 10 episodes of that. You know what I mean? Like, they really harped on that a bit too much, and it dragged down the pacing a bit. But again, overall, quality-wise, very, very good show. Like, if you're looking for another video game style show or just like a solid shonen, Log Horizon's here for you. So shout out Log Horizon. Next up we got My Hero Academia, which another very divisive show. But again, with a lot of these shows, I think it's undeniable how popular My Hero is. But I think it's going to go at the top of S tier. I don't think it's in the goated tier yet. As much as I love My Hero, and for a while I was saying it was my favorite anime, it does not hold true today. But for a hot minute, I really, really adored the show, and I still do love it. But I do think it's just barely not in the GOAT tier just yet. So, what is there to be said about My Hero that hasn't been said already? As much as we've talked about other shows being really good at world building, I think this might be the show for world building. It does a phenomenal job of pacing and getting you interested in all these characters and this whole world and everything going on with it. It is undeniable how fun it is to think about, oh, what would my quirk be? Where would I be in the school? You know, like all that stuff. It is such a fun universe, even though we've obviously in 2022 in the world of Marvel and all this stuff, we've seen the superhero tropes done so many times, but it still manages to feel super fresh and unique and so entertaining. The soundtrack is amazing. Again, the characters are super interesting. Even like the smallest characters that you see for just like 5 minutes, you want to know so much more about all of these characters, whether it's Class A, Class B, the pro heroes, the villains. Like, it's just insane how well the world building is done. It does have its flaws, I will say, especially me personally. I just like a lot of other people, feel that the way women are handled in this show is not great. It definitely leaves a lot to be desired there. And there are some points where it kind of drags a bit, especially once you start to get to like season 4, season 5. And there are so many characters that it's hard to dedicate the time that you need to these characters. Obviously, My Hero is going to be around for a long time, so the jury's still out on that, of how much world building it's going to get to do. So we don't have the pleasure of something like Naruto, where we already know how everything concludes and everything ends. Who knows where My Hero is going to go? I've been told the manga is incredible. So all signs point to it getting to that GOAT tier. But for now, I think it's just a very good show. For sure worth your time. This is my number one. If I'm recommending anime to someone that has not seen it before, My Hero is the go-to. It is a masterclass in everything shonen. And again, just an incredible show. It's not at that GOAT level yet, but it's getting there. It's getting there for sure. And if I were to do this list again in 5 years, who knows where it's going to be. So that's My Hero. Next up is No Game, No Life, which is like, speaking of women being handled not so great in anime, No Game, No Life is here. And I think it's gotta go like right in the middle of V tier. It's a really quick watch, and it's a very interesting premise. It's similar to Sword Art Online, Sword Art Online Log Horizon, as like, getting stuck in the game. But it has its own twist to that. And the character, like the main two characters, are very interesting, and you want to know more about them and about this new world that they're thrown into, literally. But again, there's some weird stuff going on in the show. I mean, again, it's anime, so what can you do? But it's got its flaws. There's a lot of like things that happen in the plot that feel just a little odd and a little uncomfortable, and a lot of things that happen when it comes to like them winning the games and like the logistics of this world. It constantly opens up a million cans of worms. Like, well, why don't they just do this? Why don't they just do that? Like all that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, this show, but it is entertaining and it is very unique. And the colors and animation are very unique for sure. As much as, again, we've talked about these other video game shows, No Game, No Life is like, it feels like you are in a game. Like, it, again, that's the point, but it nails the aesthetic for sure. So I do think it gets a lot of points for that, and it had a good impact for its time. It doesn't hold up super well, and it's definitely divisive, to say the least. But I think B tier is a very solid place for it. It's definitely worth a watch. It's a quick watch. If you're looking for something new, something unique, No Game, No Life is certainly an option. So, next up we have One Punch Man, which, honestly, I think also is an S tier show. I do think it just barely makes the cut of S tier because I think season 2 was just kind of okay. But especially season 1, so much fun. Like, so much fun. I've talked about Kill la Kill doing a great job of like subverting the genre and making fun of these like shonen tropes. But One Punch Man takes that idea and punches through the ceiling. It just is wild. Like, it's such a good, like, stereotypical shonen show while still making fun of everything shonen and making fun of the audience, like, for liking this, but it still does it so well. Like, it's wild how balanced it is in that respect. The soundtrack is incredible. The animation is wonderful. Sometimes it's a little dark. Not dark as in, like, tonally, but, like, literally, it is hard to see the scenes sometimes. I don't know what it is about One Punch Man that does that, but that's a very small gripe. It's such a fun ride from start to finish. Again, you immediately want to know more about all these different characters that are introduced and, like, the whole world, and the different, like, dichotomies of everything. It's a very, very, very fun show. If you like anime at all, especially shonen, you haven't seen One Punch Man, you should totally check it out. It is a wild ride and a very quality show overall, and obviously extremely popular. It has had a pretty solid impact on anime as a whole. So I think One Punch Man for sure, S tier show. Talk about popular shows. Next up we got One Piece, and I don't think I even need to say it. Obviously, this is one of the greatest anime of all time. A lot of people. So we touched on it a little bit, but a lot of people have the opinion that there are only 3 greatest of all time anime, those being Naruto, Dragon Ball, and One Piece, and it makes sense. Obviously, One Piece, incredibly popular show. I think it's the #1 selling manga of all time. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case, or the longest standing. Just wild. Just absolutely wild show. A lot going on. I personally have a few gripes with it that I'm not going to get into, because again, I'm trying to be positive and they are very nitpicky. But I'm not the biggest fan of One Piece personally, but it is undeniable how ridiculously popular, successful, and impactful this show is. It's insane, and it has the critical acclaim to back it up as well. And obviously overall quality continues to get better and better as seasons go on and as animation gets better. The music is great. It's obviously one of the greatest anime of all time. There's only so much to be said about One Piece at this point. But just for me personally, in my rankings, I don't think it's higher than the other shows in front of it. But obviously it's one of the best of all time. You can't argue that. You just can't. And it's incredibly popular for a reason. So One Piece, one of the GOATs. Next up we have Samurai Champloo. And honestly, and I might be overhyping it a little bit, but I think this is also S tier for sure. Samurai Champloo, wonderful show. Just like purely off, I guess, vibes alone or like aesthetics alone, unmatched. Like, it is such a cool, awesome, dope show. The characters are super fun. They don't throw a million characters at you. You get your main characters. You learn a lot about them as you go. You get awesome fight scenes, an amazing soundtrack, beautiful animation, and you're out of there. Like, it's a quick watch. It's super enjoyable, extremely memorable, surprisingly impactful for anime as a whole, and it's still very relevant to this day. And it's just one of the best animes out there, for sure. The only thing holding it back from the GOAT tier is, again, it doesn't have that like overwhelming impact of popularity, but it does have tremendous impact and popularity, and it like is an incredible show, and clearly has made its mark and carved its way into anime history. It just, again, it's lacking like that overwhelming star status of the rest of these shows, but as far as just quality, again, it's in that Steins Gate level of just pure, just fantastically good. Like, I'm running out of adjectives to describe something being good. But Samurai Champloo, 1000% worth your time. Such a fun watch. Again, it's a quick one, but again, it leaves its mark for sure, and I can't recommend it enough. Samurai Champloo, great show. Next up, we have a much more recent show, being Promised Neverland, which I feel very similarly to Fairy Tail, and Seven Deadly Sins on this one, where I just personally, I hated this. I was not a fan. I was not enjoying my time. But after episode 1, you can't not watch it. You have to know what happens. So it's a very wild ride. Again, I have my own nitpicks that I'm not going to get into here because I don't want to just be super over negative and like super downplay an entire anime just because of personal bias. But overall, it's a very quality show. It's super intense. The soundtrack does a lot to set the tone. The characters are very endearing. Again, you want to know more about their overall setting and like just it has that like Attack on Titan feel of this impending doom while still being super open to interpretation and leaving room for the viewer to wonder and be interested in the world. So it is a good show. It's just I hated it. Like I just was like, but in a good way. Like I hate it in a good way. Of like I just want this to be over. Like I want to skip to the end and we're all singing sunshines and rainbows. Like can we get to that please? But like obviously that's not how the show works. And it's very quality overall. It's a good show. I can definitely recommend it for that. It's just, you know, I just personally was stressing. My cholesterol definitely went up after watching this show. But that's a good thing. That means it's gripping your audience, which is what you want. You'd much rather be memorable than forgettable. So, Promised Neverland, B+ tier. Finally, we have Tokyo Ghoul. I don't know why I have Steins Gate twice. But finally, we have Tokyo Ghoul, which, Tokyo Ghoul, again, it's not as much as Attack on Titan, but it's very similar to Attack on Titan in that when it first came out, this show was all over the place. And for good reason. It's a very, very good show. But I do think it's going to go at the top of A tier. Trust me, if this was just me, I'd put it higher. But it does have the overall popularity and impact. It was definitely ridiculously popular when it first came out. And it took over anime as soon as it dropped. But I do think the season 2 ending really holds it back. Like, really, really holds it back. Because season 1, this whole time you're waiting for it to happen. You're waiting for it to happen. Boom, at the end of season 1, Kaneki does this thing. It finally goes down. Super excited. Go straight into season 2. You get to see all this cool stuff happen. You get to see all the action. Again, it's animated beautifully. The soundtrack is amazing. It's like a quality show. It's just the ending really leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Not to a, you know, Game of Thrones season 8 level of as soon as you're done with, or like a Rise of Skywalker level to where as soon as it's over, you don't want to think about the franchise anymore. But it's just, it really felt like it left a lot to be desired. Like, for the hype that went into it, it really, really, really did not live up to that expectation that a lot of viewers had, not just me. I can't tell you how much I want this show, or I wanted the show to be better than it ended up being, at least in the ending. Overall, before you get to the ending, still a great ride, very intriguing characters, super intriguing world, so fun to explore that, and again, quality-wise, sound-wise, visually, fantastic all around. It just, again, that ending is really, really hurting it. I want to put an S tier so bad because just like all the other aspects, it nails. But I just think that ending really, really, really hurt it because it ends up hurting all the other aspects of it because people aren't as willing to talk about it and keep its legacy, I guess, alive, you know, because so many people were so let down by how it turned out. That I think it goes at the top of A tier. But again, I think there's a very good argument to put in S tier. Don't get me wrong. If you guys want to argue with me about it in the comments, go for it. I'd love to hear your opinions. But with that said, that's going to be the anime tier list. So again, this is just anime that I've personally seen or heard a lot about. I can't speak for things I haven't heard much about or seen. For our tier list, we've got all these shows in the GOAT tier, the greatest of all time. We got our S tier shows, our A tier shows, B plus tier is a lot more full than I thought it would be. You get the B tier, C plus, and then unfortunately, Persona is alone in the C tier, which makes me sad. I think that's gonna do it. So, thank you so much for watching. If you've made it to this point in the video, again, thank you so much. If you haven't liked the video already, please do. I would really appreciate that. You know, hashtag YouTuber over here. Help feed the algorithm, baby. It just, you know, it does help a lot. It makes me feel good. So definitely like and subscribe, as they say. And let me know any other suggestions you'd want to see for any future tier lists. And again, let me know your opinions on this. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. If I overrated or underrated something. But yeah, again, I think that's going to do it for me. If you want to find me somewhere else, at Storm Targaryen on Twitch. I live stream all the time. And on TikTok as well. But yeah, anyways, that's going to do it. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next time.